now my pleasure to introduce several distinguished guests from various levels of politics who will address governmental support for our community. I would now like to invite Ms. Lana Formosa, Mayor of Dundinag, to join us on the stage and share her insights. Let's all give her a sounding round of applause for Ms. Formosa.
Salam alaikum and Womanjik everyone. I would begin by acknowledging the traditional custodians of this land on which we meet, the Bunurong people, and pay my respect to their elders past and present. I recognise and respect their continuing connections to climate, culture, country and waters. I would also like to acknowledge my very good friend who's just stepped out for the moment, Julian Hill, Federal Member for Bruce, and obviously a very good friend to the Hezara community. The entire Federation of Hezara Council of Australia, in particular Bashir Fayak, thank you so much for the invitation. And a warm welcome to you all here today, in particular the Women's Committee. I'd like to see a lot more of you taking up the step of leadership positions in your community. As the Mayor of the City of Greater Dandenong, I'm honoured to be here today and welcome you to our city for the Your Voice, Our Mission event. It was also a huge honour and privilege for me to represent the Hezara community in Canberra for the inauguration of the Council at Federal Parliament in February this year. That was a great honour and I saw a lot of you there at that time. Greater Dandenong is recognised as the most culturally diverse community in Australia. I never get sick and tired of saying that. We have many Hazaras who call our city home. We celebrate our diversity and we continually strive to live in peace and harmony, something that generations of Hazaras have also been striving for. As a refugee welcome zone since 2002, we stand in solidarity with the support the Hazara community. We are incredibly proud to have so many people of Hazara heritage as part of our vibrant and diverse community. We are proud to work with you to help you elevate your community's interests and voices on a local and national platform. I will be particularly doing so once again this week in Canberra as I advocate for our mayoral task force, Back Your Neighbour. As we strive to be the voice for refugees and asylum seekers in City of Greater Dandenong in particular, but nationally for the 100,000 refugees in limbos for the past decade. Your organisation, the Federation of Hezara Council of Australia, shares an important mission with Council, and that is to foster social cohesion and inclusivity. By sharing your stories and your culture, you foster a greater sense of understanding in the wider community, helping to bring peace and harmony to Greater Dandenong and beyond. Diversity gives us strength and makes Australia a better place to live. It is a key part of our identity here in Greater Dandenong in particular. I want to thank you all for inviting me here to this evening to celebrate your organisation. On behalf of Greater Dandenong City Council, I commit to continuing to build a positive relationship with your organisation and our valued community of Hazaras. Tashakur, Koda Hazik.
Thank you, Ms. Lana Formosa, for your insightful remarks and for sharing your perspective with us today. Now we will hear from Mr. Julian Hill MP. Please join me in giving a warm round of applause to Mr. Hill. As Mr. Julian Hill has applied, we have a small gift on behalf of the community.
Thank you for the invitation to be here. It really is a pleasure and a privilege. I'll just keep the acknowledgements quite brief, but I do want to acknowledge Bashir as the Executive Director. My apologies on behalf of my colleague Cassandra Fernando, the Federal Member for Holt. Between us, Cassandra and I are very proud to represent the largest community of Hazara people and people born in Afghanistan of any part of Australia. Also to acknowledge my friend the Mayor, Councillor Lana Formosa, and so many community leaders here in this room and so many familiar faces. I'm not going to try and acknowledge all of you, but again, a special shout out to our tables of women community leaders over there. It's terrific to have you here. I talk at Citizenships about the three strands to our great national story here in Australia. I acknowledge Indigenous owners, traditional owners of the lands on which we meet. We should be proud that our continent is home to the world's oldest continuous civilization. We also pay tribute and renew our bonds to our democratic traditions, which we've inherited from European settlement, our system of government, and never take for granted the fact that we do get to vote and choose our government, something that people who've come from Afghanistan in particular do not enjoy, and people have literally sacrificed their lives over many years fighting for that basic right. But also the miracle that is modern multicultural Australia, a country with few other places like us on earth. And what you do here today is in the finest of all of those traditions. Indigenous customs of bringing diverse groups together, cultures and tribes, for common purpose, for dialogue, rituals and celebrations. The democratic tradition of appointments and elections and committees that will soon be formed. No doubt a lot of community politics to get to this point, something I know well. But also our quintessential history in diverse multicultural Australia to form associations like this that scale up the efforts of smaller local groups and find common ground amongst these groups. It's a tradition that I've seen in my life in Australia from pretty much every community, the Greeks, the Indians, Cambodians, Vietnamese, Serbians. Even Lana's the first mayor of Serbian heritage, whose parents came to this country as migrants, and many more. And I know from talking with Bashir, it's the culmination of work over a very long time, in some respects over 25 years, to bring 25 community groups or more together in common purpose. And that takes a lot of work. Now, coming together is a positive thing for any community. And I've made the point repeatedly to many community leaders that the level of fragmentation in the community sphere of people from Afghanistan, including Hazara groups, really all tribes and backgrounds, Pashtun, Tajik, Uzbek, Sunni, Shia, and more, that this fragmentation weakens the community's advocacy and cohesion. It sometimes feels like there's too many groups doing the same thing. Whilst often MPs and governments, when we ask questions, they'll then go, oh, okay, that makes sense. We understand why there's this group and that group and the other group and the various purposes. From the outside, I can assure you, we see that you're so often working for the same thing and would have more impact if you work more closely together. Now, it is traditional for many cultures to have groups that reflect provinces of origin or variations in language or culture or religion, ethnicity and so on. That's perfectly normal. Sometimes there's personality clashes and two groups go in two different directions because they can't agree who'll be the president. That's also normal in communities. Not ideal, but it happens. But I'll give you the example of the Greek community. I grew up in Australia and many of our school friends were Greek. They did exactly the kind of path that many of your children are doing. They trotted off to Greek language school on the weekend and Greek church on Sundays. And there were so many different wonderful Greek groups. There still are in Dundénaગ and elsewhere. They often reflected the particular island in Greece where their families came from. That was their common bond. Or different political views or different religious traditions or local communities or places where they settled in Australia. But they also over time formed those umbrella associations that brought them all together, which improved their advocacy to government and their service to the community. Common advocacy priorities. I can tell you, if you come to MPs and governments with 2 or 3 things that matter to the whole community, you'll have far more impact than if 20 groups come in with 30 different priorities. Sharing ideas and resources, people struggle with the same things in all the little groups. Bigger, more inclusive events and celebrations that everyone can go to. More efficient services as the community grows and matures, and more constructive intra and inter-community dialogues. And so in celebrating unity, as we do here today, we've also got to acknowledge that every community in Australia, every multicultural migrant community has complex intra-communal issues to manage in its diaspora. And I want to note that it is normal for groups settling in Australia to have to grapple with the complexity of ethnic issues or previous or ongoing conflicts from home countries and regions. We're used to this. I've dealt with it for years. The Greeks and the Turks, the Sinhalese and the Tamils from Sri Lanka, the Armenians and the Azerbaijanis, various groups in India, in Ethiopia, in the Balkans, in Yugoslavia, in South Sudan, in many parts of Asia. And Australians from Afghanistan and Iran and Pakistan are no different to other Australians in this regard. Afghanistan is a multi-ethnic, multilingual, multicultural country. Indeed, as my friends have taught me, in the national anthem there's 14 different tribes formally recognised and acknowledged. And Hazara people, of course, are one of the principal ethnic groups, cultural groups in Afghanistan and have significant minority populations in Pakistan and Iran. Hazaras have been recognised for centuries by historians as a group of people with a distinct culture and identity. They're a unique blend, so I've learnt, of Central Asian and Persian influences. There's a complex history, of course, especially for Hazaras, with specific persecution or exclusion in many parts of Afghanistan at different times for over a century. There's no single truth to this, of course. If we sat down and we asked every person in this room, everyone would have slightly different perspectives and different understandings and different views about history and different ideas about how we go forward as a country here in Australia, as will the broader community of people from Afghanistan. But the important point for us today is that as Australians we have far more in common than we have differences. And so the formation of the Federation is a positive thing for the Hazara community. But it should not be understood as a negative for other groups. Bashir has spoken to me and others about how it will be important to be inclusive and collaborate with Pashtun and Tajik brothers and sisters in Australia and other groups. And as an MP who represents the whole community, I enjoy, along with Lana and others, attending Pashtun cultural events, Tajik events in every part of the community. And I say the same thing that I say here today to every part of the community. We must always remember that the Australians who've migrated from Afghanistan to be safe and build a life in our great country have more in common than differences. And so today should be understood as being about unity and Australian values, and going forward to craft lives here in Australia as Australians. I'll just give a shout out to the young people. This message that I'm reflecting on is especially important for our young people and our children. I know from my conversations with young people in all multicultural groups that they're proud of their ethnic identity and cultural and linguistic heritage. But first and foremost, also see themselves as Australians. Your country. It's where your children and your grandchildren will take their place in every part of Australian life, building prosperity, families, and contributing to our country. And so when I visit our schools, or yesterday morning I went to a great event with the Victorian Afghan Students Association, I'm so proud, so proud, and Lana was a school teacher at Dandinong High for many years, to see young people from Afghanistan, including so many wonderful young Hazara women and men. I'll put the women first because it's very clear in many of these groups it's the young women leading the way, up there as MCs. Studying hard, working hard and taking leadership roles in schools, school captains, in the community. And I also know when I talk with them, when I sit down, and it takes a little bit of time to build a bit of trust with young people before they start to relax and open up. There are times when the conflicts of their parents or their ancestral countries frustrate them as they build friendships and build lives here. And I've heard this from young people in numerous countries, from Sri Lanka, from South Sudan, with different tribal conflicts, from Afghanistan and many more. So let's also recommit today to make sure that we all set the positive example as Australians for our young people and bring people together, unity in our diversity. And the final point I just want to make for a few minutes more is that despite our success as a country, we cannot take our modern multicultural Australia for granted. I'm incredibly proud that it was the Whitlam Labor government back in the 1970s that dismantled the last vestiges of the White Australia policy, a racist policy for the first long period, well over a century, of European settlement on this continent, that excluded most people in the world from migrating to Australia, including everyone here. Our multicultural, except for the Afghan Cameliers back in the 1800s, they got in. Our multiculturalism, that miracle we enjoy here in southeast Melbourne especially, is not an accident. It's no accident. It's a result of deliberate government policy over many decades and investments by our national, state and local governments. And the work, not just governments, it's the work, usually unpaid work, of untold thousands of community leaders and community members in groups like those that are represented here today, to help people settle into life here, to keeping cultures, language and traditions alive as we build our lives together. And also, as communities mature, as more people speak English, as the children grow up, sharing those cultural traditions with everyone else from the community. I'm really proud that the government that I'm a member of, the Albanese Labor government, has removed in our first 2 years the blatant discrimination in the migration system which we inherited, which affected people from Afghanistan in particular. The absolutely unconscionable delays for nearly a decade in some cases of people waiting for their citizenship. The appalling impact of family separations from thousands and thousands of cases for partner visas and children who had been waiting for 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years, separated from their wives and children. I am really proud of the progress we've made. I know people always want things to be faster. I know the humanitarian visa system will never be able to bring everyone we would like to Australia. I know that, you know that. But what we've done with partner visas, in getting families back together, in letting people take their place in Australia, and in converting now nearly 19,000 temporary protection visas, TPV and SHEV visas, to permanent visas so people can build their lives in this country. That's no accident. We committed before the election, we do that and we'll do it. And it is important that we reflect on progress in these things because they're hard fought. Not every Australian agrees with that. We're a diverse country. But we've restored a non-discriminatory migration policy. There's more work to do, but I really recognise Andrew Giles's work in this space as the Minister. But as I said, we can't take our social cohesion for granted. And people like the Prime Minister Albanese, Senator Penny Wong, our Foreign Minister, who've been around in politics in this country for 20, 30 years, they say that they've never seen our social cohesion so fractured and strained as it is right now, in no small part due to global conflicts in the Middle East and elsewhere. And this, of course, is exacerbated when leaders and some political parties choose to seek domestic political advantage and want to go and chase votes in one community or another by taking extreme positions on foreign conflicts, by stoking division. No group, I can tell you this, from the 1800s when it was the Irish Catholics versus the Protestants, or at any other point in Australian history, no group has ever done well in this country from sectarianism, from seeing themselves as different based on their ethnicity or their religion. And we must make sure we don't fall into that trap. And so I say this very seriously to you as a group of so many wonderful community leaders. Every single one of us in this country in a position of leadership, whether it's political leaders or religious leaders or community leaders, we have a shared responsibility to ensure in the language that we use, the way we talk about other people and other groups, in the positions that we take, that we seek to bring Australians together, not divide them. That when we have differences to talk about, and of course we have differences, of course we have disagreements, we're human, it's Australia, that we talk about them constructively and calmly and we sit down and resolve them. Or at times, agree to disagree, that's okay too. And so it's for those reasons that it is wonderful to see so many groups coming together in common purpose, just as has occurred in communities, other communities for decades in our great country. Now, I want to close just by reading 4 paragraphs from Bashir's book, which I got a copy of in Canberra last week. They're beautiful paragraphs. I'll just quote from Bashir's foreword, his own words. If I was to describe my journey, it would be one of a young boy who had to fight tooth and nail to overcome my circumstances. I was born and raised in a small rural village in Afghanistan, a place that was beautiful, but also marred by war and poverty. Life was tough, but it was all I knew. However, that all changed when I decided to pursue my dream of finding better opportunities in life. My journey took me on a perilous track through dangerous terrains, facing challenges and obstacles that I never thought I would overcome. I was detained, interrogated and mistreated, but I never gave up. I knew that there was a better life waiting for me, and I was determined to reach it. I finally made it to a place of safety, but that was only the beginning. I had to start from scratch, with no support and no resources to rely on. However, I refused to let my circumstances define me. I was determined to educate myself and become a better person. Resilience is the word I would use to describe what it takes to rise when the odds are stacked against you. I have faced countless challenges and obstacles, but I've never given up. Bashir's story, as he says, it is a testament to the power of perseverance in the human spirit, and more broadly, I say, with great love and fondness. It is testament, it is that sense of resilience despite the obstacles that Hazara people have faced, that so many people from Afghanistan have faced, that define your people going forward and the contribution that you are making, I know that you will make to our great country in the years and the decades ahead as your children and grandchildren take their place and build their lives here in our country. So I really want to thank you. I want to thank you for inviting me. I want to thank you for the contribution that you're already making to Australia, and thank you for the work that you'll do collaboratively through the Federation, for the Hazara community and for the broader Australian community. Thank you very much. And now I apologise because I have to go and get a plane to Canberra.
Please wait.
Okay.
Sorry.
Thank you.
Mr. Julian Hillenby, thank you for your inspiring words and for sharing your insights with us today. As Julian has a flight, we have a small gift on behalf of the community. از سرجنرال مراد علی مراد دعوت می شود تا هدیه‌ای که برای مستر جولیان در نظر گرفته شده را تقدیم نماید.